Hello and welcome to FireDEV, a fireside chat with great people in the industry. And today I have Cyril Barrow. And Cyril, do you want to do a little introduction?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for having me today. As I'm Cyril, my nationality, I'm French. I'm living in Finland. I've been living in Finland 17 years. And I'm working in the game industry. I can talk more about who I am, but that's overall me.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. So you've got a wealth of experience. So let's just go back a little bit in time. You worked at Digital Chocolate, which made games like Tower Blocks, Brick Breaker, Revolution, and it's games I remember playing and having fun memories of. What did you specifically do at Digital Chocolate?
That's a very good question. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to step back maybe a few years before Digital Chocolate because I'm kind of proud of where I come from, and I think it's a nice anecdote to start this discussion. So, when I was at university, I studied aircraft engineering, and I thought I would be an aircraft engineer. I will build aircraft, and this is what I wanted to do. After university, I didn't build aircraft, but I worked in factories and I built mechanical items. So I spent 10 years of my life before joining Digital Chocolate working in factories as quality manager or improvement manager. But my life took me to Finland, and when I arrived to Finland, it was a bit tough because I couldn't speak the language. So what happened then? I saw these ads in the game industry, and I thought, "Oh, that sounds fun." But what do I know about game and in this industry? And then I thought, well, if you want a cool job, you better apply for a cool position. So I applied, and 2 days later, I was interviewed at Digital Chocolate, and there were a few person interviewing me, but one of them was Ilkka Pananen. And Ilkka Pananen, if you know him, he's currently the CEO of Supercell, based in Finland. And I remember Ilka asking me two questions. The first one is, "Are you a coder?" And I say, "No, I'm not a coder." Remember, I was coming from mechanical industry, and they say, "Well, are you a gamer then?" And I was like, "No, I'm not a gamer." And he was like, "Well, what do you mean you're not a gamer? You don't play any game?" I was like, "Yeah, no, well, I play Snake on my phone and Nokia phone back then, and I play Doom on my PC." And then, big smile on my face, on his face, and say, "Well, you know what? This is exactly the type of players we're looking after. Those people who claim they're not gamers, but eventually are playing games." So this was my entry to Digital Chocolate. This was my entry from mechanical engineering to IT. And to answer your question, Fraham, what did I do at Digital Chocolate? Very quickly, I was asked to manage people, manage processes, and manage product. So this is how I define myself. Most about process and people than product. But eventually, in the game industry, you always fall down on looking at product.
Oh yeah, for sure. And how did you get your job at Digital Chocolate specifically? Like, what was the steps that you took?
Yeah. So I mean, as I explained briefly here, I'll go into a bit more detail. I had to figure out what I can do because I work in factory. I was looking at processes, looking at how people manufacture goods, how defects are created, why are they created, how do you go to root cause of defect, and how do you improve processes, etc. So I had that in mind, and that's the knowledge I built for 10 years. And when I came to Finland, I thought, how do I apply that? I don't speak the language. I can't work in a factory. I cannot read a process or procedure. I cannot talk to people to explain to them how to build things. So I just saw this ad saying we're looking for a team lead. And I was like, well, I can lead people. I can lead team. It's something I practiced for 10 years. So I applied on the basis that I thought I could lead a team. So they interviewed me about, okay, how do you lead a team, and then eventually how do you lead a process, and how do you prioritize, and this is how I got the job. So I got the job. My first job at Digital Chocolate was, there was a process to make games for the European market, and back then you had to port the game for specific handset. You had to make sure the game would work on a specific J2ME phone, and the US market had very different phones from Europe. So they needed a dedicated team in Helsinki that would port those existing games, those tower blocks, as you mentioned, into phone that were very specifically implanted, sold in the US. So for T-Mobile USA, for Singular back then, for Verizon, this type of thing. So I was taking those pieces of code that were master profile, and I was making sure those games would work on basically any US phone.
Okay, and you mentioned that you wasn't like a hardcore gamer or anything. You just, just played Snake on your phone, which I remember playing that initially on my dad's phone, and then I remember playing Snake 2, where you could go for the wars, and then, eventually having my own phone to play it on for the smartphone revolution. Did you? Because obviously you've been at gaming companies, which again we'll cover all the other different ones momentarily. Like, have you become more of a gamer personally since?
That's a great question because I cannot claim I'm not a gamer. I've been working 17 years in the game industry. It's not something I can claim anymore. I kind of like to say it because I like the fact that I'm shocking a little bit people when I say that. But I remember, for example, at Rovio, the roadmap was huge. I mean, there was such a big amount of prototype that we were doing and game in production and unreleased title. I think at some point we estimated we needed 15 different projects in parallel in order to be able to successfully launch 1 or 2 games per year. We needed this funnel of 15 prototype. So when you work in a company with 15 prototype, basically you spend majority of your gaming bandwidth into playing those games. And at some point it was interesting because I realized, oh my God, I don't have time to play any other game, any other game that are just being released. But eventually I was playing so much. So there's always a fine line between, hey, at the end of the day, it's a job. I need to play this. I need to have an opinion about the game we're internally developing versus I'm enjoying. And as you can imagine, when you do 15 prototypes, some prototypes are not that good. It's just the name of the game. So sometimes you have to force yourself to play. And also, I'm not a big fan of RPG, but we did quite a lot of RPGs at Rovio. So I had to play RPG, and I was a little bit forcing myself. Just that, oh, that's a job, let me play this. And so much I was just enjoying myself and just playing, at home and on my way to work and at work and during lunchtime. And, I was playing all the time. So yeah, I'm a gamer now, for sure.
Okay, and yeah, because you're saying obviously you got to get that balance between obviously doing it for your job, less effectively research, compared to just wasting your work time and just playing. Because obviously, I think for you is obviously very important because you typically initially was not a gamer to dive into it and actually test them out. Whereas other people, let's say they were hardcore gamers, it can be very easy for them to just use the excuse of I am working, even though let's say if they're a coder, obviously they got to play it, but maybe play some other games to see how they do things, some competitors, but you still got to make your own game. So yeah, obviously there's definitely a contrast there. What was your favorite game to play that Digital Chocolate developed?
So there was different phases. So before I answer this, I want to bounce on what you said. I totally agree with you. There is the idea that if you're passionate about game, you think that you go into the game industry thinking that you will play a lot of game.
Mm.
I don't want to remove the appeal of the industry, but it's true that let's say you're QA in the game industry, you will test the same game again and again and again and again and again and again and again until it's released. So at some point, it's also a job. You have to play that game one more time in order to find bugs. It's not that you 100%. Even if you enjoy this game, at some point it becomes a job. Same with a coder. At some point, you've been working on the same game for 5 years. Working on that particular game, becomes a little bit of a routine task. So I just want to also to the audience to be realistic about what it is to make game. It's a lot of fun when you do prototype, when you do ideation, when you switch from one game to another. There are phases that becomes a little bit more routine. So for me at Digital Chocolate, there was 2 games that I really like. We had different phases. So on phone, Tower blocks for sure. It was like, all time favorite. It's just you just have to press the 5 key and drop blocks on top of each other as the tower that gets bigger and bigger start to swing from left to right, and you score points the more aligned your tower is. This is it's forever fun, like evergreen fun. Then we move into different platform. We try PC downloadables, and we try Facebook game, and there was this game, City Builder. I think it's Millionaire City. It was called, if memory is correct. Basically, it's you build some kind of tycoon city builder. Very very simple, but so addictive. I mean, you will level up your houses, and you will collect revenue from your houses and these kind of things. It was done from our studio in Barcelona, and they had a magic touch in this type of game. I played a lot of that game on Facebook, a lot.
Yeah. Okay. And so Digital Chocolate went defunct in 2014. Like, what do you think went wrong or what happened? Because you wasn't there at that point, but I'm guessing you still probably have some opinions or connections to the company. Like, what happened? Because I remember like those games. Like I said, I have fond memories of. I remember them being successful. So, like, what happened to Digital Chocolate? Because they're not around in that entity today.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm not sure I've had the answer, but of course I've been thinking a lot about that. And to answer your question, it didn't come overnight. It's not something that happened when I was not there. Of course, when I was still there, I saw some of the premises of let's say this fall. My analysis after all those years is, I mean, there were a couple of. It's super easy to say in hindsight, but there were a couple of turns that the company took a bit of time to take. The first turn was the iPhone, the smartphone turn. The company took a little bit of time for that, so we lost a few months, maybe 3, 6, 9 months in the market. By that time, company like Rovio, had really embraced the smartphone. Same with the tablet. Supercell came and really focused on the tablet, and Digital Chocolate was still focusing on something else. The other turn was the free to play. It took us a few months or so to move into free to play. We stayed on premium for a little while. So those, you lose your competitive edge. You go from the top 5 publisher on J2ME to, oh my God, there was a turn we didn't take it. So suddenly you start to lose the edge that you have. Eventually, my analysis, and I don't know if it's true, if it's fair, or whatever, but I feel overall that that Digital Chocolate tried to do too much at the same time. Instead of focusing on something and trying to do well, it felt like everything was spread thin and everything was done a little bit with not enough focus. That's my feeling from within, and that's just crippling year after year. For example, when I left Digital Chocolate, it was okay. We haven't managed to do successful game for a while, and that's the story of many, many, many game studio. We haven't managed to do successful game for a while, so we don't need this team that basically is responsible to take those successful game to other platforms. So we will rebuild this team later, but obviously you never rebuild it. And then, okay, we cannot make successful games. So instead of having 5 or 10 different tracks, tracks that will try to make prototype, you just have only 3 or 5. And then from 3 or 5, you just keep one. And then eventually you close. Anyway, that's my analysis. Maybe lack of focus.
Okay. And afterwards, you are COO at Thinglink. Like, tell us about that. Like, how you got your job there, what you did there. Because that's one of the companies, when I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, a name that I didn't recognize. There's plenty of names on there I recognized, but Thinglink was not one of them.
Yeah, so Thinglink was not a game industry. So remember, I stayed 7 years at Digital Chocolate. And remember, I came from a totally different industry into the game industry. So 7 years later, I love what I was doing. I love the game industry. I started to build a career there. I started as a team lead, and I ended up, VP global operations at Digital Chocolate. So I had a career. It was like very rewarding personally. But then I thought, well, there are startups in Finland. what if I will go to a startup? Doesn't have to be a game startup. And back then there was not a lot of game startup. I mean, there was Supercell, there was few, but the startup scene in the game industry in Finland at that time was not huge. So I thought I'd like to try a startup. So there was this company doing interactive images on the software as a service SaaS scheme. So I thought, well, I can apply all my learning from the game industry to look at retention, to look at monetization, to look at virality, to look at all those kind of pillars of game making. So I moved to Thinglink for roughly a year as a CEO. It was a great experience. I mean, it was my first toe into the startup world, understanding that cash was was a variable, was a how do you say, a resource that diminished. When you work at Digital Chocolate, you just do your job and you don't really think about how much money is in the bank account. But when you're a startup, the first thing you do in the morning is look at how much cash there is on your bank account. Then you manage headcount. You manage a roadmap. You're a Scrum Master. You're a product owner of a product. You do all this. So at Thinglink, I was one of 7 people in a startup. My title was CEO, but basically I was making sure that everybody working on the product had everything they need to work on the product, and I would do everything else.
Okay. And what, because obviously you went away from the gaming industry for a little bit, what made you come back?
Well, the game industry came back to me. I had a tap on the shoulder from Gameloft, and they say, "Hey, we want to open a studio in Helsinki. Look at Rovio, look at Supercell. There is definitely something magic in the water. Why don't you assemble a team and replicate this success for Gameloft? We have IPs, we have money, we can set up a studio for you." So they came to me, and I was like, well, okay, so I've been a year in this startup. I got what I wanted from the experience, but the game industry seems to be where my knowledge can be applied the best. And that's why I left Thinglink for this unique opportunity to open a studio for. I'm French, and Gameloft is French, and I thought, that would be a lot of aligned stars here, and I would go to Gameloft to open a studio for them.
Okay, so yeah, you had a 1 year stint at Gameloft. I remember, playing games like Nova, Modern Combat, and I felt, especially, in the early days of, mobile gaming on iPhone. And I also remember getting my iPad the first thing I did was jailbreak it straight away and installing games like that. So I do remember those, fun times. But like, what did you like at Gameloft? You said you were assembling a team. What sort of products was you assembling the team for, or was it just like a general assembly and you were doing multiple stuff?
No, so they really had something very precise in their mind. It was like Rovio is doing Angry Birds. It's casual. I'm not going to say hyper casual because now hyper casual means, but it's very casual. Let's put it that way. Then Supercell starting to ramp up with back then Clash of Clans, which was a little bit more mid-core, but still on the casual side. At least the art style was casual, and it was built from a team that knows how to do casual games. So Gameloft really wanted to have a vertical in their portfolio that would be mobile, casual. They didn't know it was going to be free to play, premium, subscription back then, so the monetization model was not set, but they were really focusing on the approachability of the experience.
Okay, so yeah, I remember you were saying, especially with digital, chocolate, just like how much it takes to make a game, in terms of money, in terms of resources. And you were saying that they're working on like 15 projects to get like 2 projects out in a year. Was it just because you was trying to find which project actually felt right beyond just the idea stage, or is it just it took so long, you have 15 going on and you just released 2, and then the next year you released another 2 of the 15? Like, what was, like, how did that 15 or so projects go eventually go into release? Like, what was the process? And I'm guessing some got scrapped.
Yeah, that's a good analysis. So those numbers come from my time at Rovio. I suppose that those numbers are slightly different from company to company, depending on the culture. And as you say, it's depending on the culture of how fast you're able to scrap, kill an idea. But at Rovio, with the system that we had, we needed to start 15 new projects every year in order to kill 12 of them. Not in the same year. I mean, it's a rolling process. Basically, a game will take 18 to 24 months to be made. And as a rolling process, you need 15 new ideas every year. Some of them you'll kill after 3 weeks. You just do a quick prototype and you say, nah, it doesn't work. Some of them you kill after 3 months. You do a bit, expanded prototype and then does it work? Some of them will be killed in soft launch after 18 months, where you start to collect proper qualitative, quantitative data from telemetry and surveys. And then you realize that it's not a scalable business. So you'll kill them at a very expensive stage of soft launch. But eventually, all those skills will add up to 12, and only two will really go to global launch. That's of course those are theoretical numbers. I mean, they are practical numbers, but they eventually become theoretical numbers.
Okay, so that's all well and good if you've got, let's say, the money and you can do 15 prototypes and whatnot. But how do you handle it from a morale standpoint? Because obviously, if let's say you've got a programmer or an artist that's been working on these games, let's say if it's killed after a couple of weeks, they're probably not going to have that much attachment. But if they've been working on it for 12 months, and especially if that's like the one main project they've been working on, they've been slaving away. They really invested in the idea. They personally feel like the game's really good, and then so somebody higher up says no, we're scrapping it. Like, how do you deal with keeping people motivated for the next project, knowing full well that it could get scrapped again and get scrapped again, even if they don't get fired, then they could for 5 years be on projects that keep getting scrapped. So how do you handle the sort of that side of it?
Mm. So the industry went from when we started J2ME, it took us roughly 2 years to make a game. Roughly, I mean, sometime less, sometime more. And you will hide the project from anybody for 18 months before you go to soft launch. And in soft launch, you'll go to Canada or you go to Australia, and then you look at the telemetry and you decide if it's a scalable business, and then you launch it. Eventually, you have the time to build confidence that the product you're making is the right product, but based on nothing else than your own thoughts and your own gut feeling. And after 18 months, if you see the KPIs are not there, you're like, wait. I've been waiting. I've been working for 18 months, and give me 2 more weeks, give me 2 more months. I need this one feature. I need to fix this first-time user experience or onboarding. There's always the brain telling you that give me 2 more, let's say, weeks, and I'll fix something that took me 18 months to build. And back then, killing at this moment was extremely difficult because you will go against, usually, I mean, this is a generality I'm making, you will go against the guts feeling of a teams thinking they can fix this because they've been so vested into this project for 18 months. Now, the modern way to make free to play is you do a prototype, and after 2 weeks, after 2 months, after, very, very quickly, you put the game out there. And you're not afraid that anybody will steal your idea because it's just a prototype. Nobody's stealing prototype. Nobody knows that your prototype is so amazing. So you just test it with 3 people, then 30 people, then 300 people, and you're only 6 months in this project. So as you build your game, you get feedback from real players, and those feedback, they never tell you it's great or it's bad. They never tell you that, but it gives you the confidence that what your hypotheses are, according to how people will play, how they will engage with the entertainment that you're building for them, it is correct or no. Well, I thought that people will build this way or they will fight that way, but actually they don't. They don't collect the weapons or they don't use this part of the map, for example. So today it's a lot easier to kill a game because eventually you get very early feedback from real user. And I think the industry has been taught to not be attached to your own ideas and to your own game, and everybody should be ready. We're not perfect. Mentally, it's difficult exercise, but we are in a lot better place today to accept to stop a project, to kill a project, to bury a project, and to bounce or something else than we used to. So to answer your question about how do you do that, before it was just simply very extremely hard, and it was seen as a management is killing our ideas and they don't understand. It takes time, and in the company like Digital Chocolate, at some point you don't have time, you don't have money anymore. They are running out of time, you're running out of money, and that's not properly communicated sometimes. But I would say today it's more embedded into the standard operating procedure of making games and testing ideas. So managing morale is a lot easier. Usually, the team itself is more prone to kill their own ideas, kill their own game based on qualitative feedback or quantitative feedback today.
Okay, so they basically expect it. So you said obviously nowadays you'll share it to, let's say, 3 people, then let's say 30 people. So like, who are those people? Because obviously if it's a beta launch or
Mhm.
an alpha launch on Steam, or even on PlayStation or something, that's a little different. But are they like the 3 people? Are they just someone internal that's not on the team, or is the external bunch of testers that you use, but they're still effectively kind of contracting employees? Like, where are you finding the initial batch of people just to get that initial feedback before you do any actual soft launch?
Right. So, of course, you play your own game, but rule number one is it doesn't matter what you think, because he says, she says, and then what? You start fighting. You say it's good, no, it's not good, no. So it doesn't matter, and of course, you don't ask your family and friends to play your game, or if you do, you don't care about what they say because they're never going to give you fair feedback. So there have to be players that are selected, and there's a limit to it. I'll come to it, but those players usually say, "I want players that play casual game. I want players that play RPG game." Or you can select the type of players, and then you have them test your game, and then you either have telemetry or you have a questionnaire at the end, and you ask them qualitative data, and then you analyze their answer. The downside is those people are paid. They are paid to do this task, to play your game. So we know the answers are never perfect. They're usually flawed. I mean, when you're paid, it's a bit hard to say, oh, this game is horrible. I don't want to play it. I don't like to play it. You're paying me to play half an hour. Let me play half an hour. So you're losing a lot of indication about the quality of your game. But this is why you're not looking for answers when you do user test. You're looking for signals. You're never looking for answers like, hey, stop your game, or yeah, carry on developing your game. You look for signals because the process is flawed the moment you start to pay people to test your game.
Okay, and I mean, yeah, that's definitely a valid point. When you are paying somebody, their, I mean, especially if that's a major part of their income, let's say they're a tester, their livelihood is obviously on the line. So obviously they want to give feedback, but they don't want to give such harsh feedback that you just don't, hire them again.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. Even if the feedback is honest, it may not be as honest as they feel. Like if they feel the game's bad, they might just say, it didn't quite flow that well, or I didn't quite enjoy it, and leave it at that.
Mm.
Even though they might feel like, oh, it's the worst game I've ever played, and I hated the way it made me feel, and
Mm.
the gameplay mechanics were just terrible. And so yeah, there's definitely that problem. The other thing you mentioned was like 18 to 24 month development cycle, which is obviously a fair bit, up to 2 years. Is that more nowadays on those sort of games, or was that even in the early days, let's say Digital Chocolate, or early at Gameloft and early at Rovio? Obviously, I think you started Rovio after the first Angry Birds was made, but like you must have an indication of how long those original games took. And also another question based on that: how is that sort of 18 to 24 month cycle split? Because it's not all development, it's not
Mhm.
all planning, and it's not all like launch. Like, so those are two questions.
Mhm.
I'll let you answer them.
That's good. Yeah, it's a good question. Thanks for asking those. Um, so one interesting point is about what is a launch. I mean, before, again, you used to develop for 18 months a game in a vacuum, and after 18 months you will have an event in the companies. Today we are soft launching this secret game that nobody has seen. Not a single player has seen this game before. We're going to launch it in Canada, and we're going to launch it in Australia. That's what we used to do before we launch it to US and the rest of the world. That was a launch. We call it a soft launch, and we knew that 3 to 6 months, usually 6 months after a soft launch, we have the global launch where you really put marketing in, and you get all the go to market plan and everything. And that was the time. You knew from the beginning of the prototyping into the soft launch, you'll spend roughly 18 months and then 6 months of soft launch, and that would be roughly 2 years of before global launch. Of course, it depends. If you do a very complex hardcore shooter, that might be longer, or RPG with 300 characters, that would take longer. But if you do a hyper casual game, it will be a lot lower. I mean, we know that recently some merge game were done in 8 weeks. 8 weeks they were able to launch. And today, as I mentioned, we do those user testing. So when do you call launch? Is it 3 people? Is that a launch? Is it 30 people? No, I don't think so. Is it 300 people? I don't think so. Is it 3,000 people? 3,000 people, you start to ask the question, is it a launch, yes or no? And 3,000 people could be, I don't know, 7 months after your start. So what I mean is, like, the definition of launch has evolved, because eventually, more and more and more and more players are seeing the game. And at which point, what is the magic number that says this is a launch? Because now it's not a 0 to 1 type of situation. It's a kind of a ramping up from a prototype that is seen by 3 players to eventually a soft launch that is seen by maybe 30,000 players. So that's where the numbers are coming, and I would say yes, this is evolving, and I think for the best. We are less afraid that people will steal our ideas, and we're more prone to put that game out there. In terms of split of phases, I would say that a prototype is roughly 3 months. Production is then there's pre-production. So prototyping is really build, play, scrap, build, or pivot, play, scrap. Until you have that sounds like something that could work. The core is fun and the meta is interesting. Something like that. I would say, but super fast. Don't get attached to your idea. Just kill in 2 days if it doesn't work. Then I would say another 3 months where you do what we call pre-production. You set up a little bit the team. You figure out what the team size should be. You set up a bit the process you want to put in place, or the tools you want to use. Are you using Unity or Unreal? Are you using a backend like this or a backend like that? Yeah, and you will work on some sort of vertical slice. Like a very, very light version of your experience. And that takes 6 months roughly. And then you'll have a production phase that lasts roughly 12 months, where entering the production phase, where you want to be in 12 months. I mean, you're still agile, but roughly you have your hypothesis on the table. You know that this is the core I want to build. This is the meta I want to build. This is the monetization system I want to build. This is the virality or the social features that I want to build. You roughly know what you want, and you just have laid it out on a 12 months plan. And then, as I said, soft launch of 3 months usually are not realistic. It's more for 6 months. So 3 months, 3 months, 12 months, and then 6 months of soft launch, where you really collect telemetry and tweak your game to optimize your KPIs.
Okay, so in that end part, that soft launch part, does that include marketing and promotion and outreach, or does that come post, the soft launch?
Yeah, so the soft launch nowadays is really about user acquisition, and user acquisition is marketing. And for 6 months, basically, you start to target some audiences, and you start to figure out if you can market your game at scale. So first, you start maybe with Australia or Canada, and you start to acquire 1,000 user, and you start to look at the telemetry. Then you start to acquire another 5,000 user, and you look at the cost of acquiring those users. Is the cost stable? Is the cost increasing? When the cost increase too much, you say, okay, okay, where else could I find some players? So you go to another country, or you go to another acquisition channel. You go from Facebook to whatever, Instagram or Google, for example. So it's soft launch is two main activity. Is one is a marketing team, performance marketing team acquiring users and trying to find the sweet spot and the most effective way to acquire a user. Today, launching a mobile game is really about acquiring user, and a game team that looks at the KPIs and making sure that the return on investment for the money spent to acquire those people is positive and fast.
Okay. And like, what sort of techniques over the years have you learned for user acquisition? Because obviously, when you're a big company, you can throw a lot of marketing, dollars at it. You can get billboards, you can get big adverts, whether it's on TV, whether it's online, cinema even, all sorts of stuff. But when you're a small indie, you're starting out. Let's say you're bootstrapped, even, or you only have a bit of funding, only enough to pay the developers and the artists. Like, how do you go about? Obviously, you want to create the game, you want to create an amazing game, but then ultimately you want millions of people to download and play your game. And if you unfortunately, if you people believe that if you build it, they will come, it generally does not happen. From my experience, you have to market. You have to, like you said, user acquisition, very important. Like, what tips and tricks would you say to get user acquisition?
Yeah, spoiler alert here. There's no magic bullet. There's none. I mean, if you think, okay, Flappy Bird was, a phenomenon. There was no need for user acquisition because everybody wanted to play it and everybody played it, and then But it's not a strategy. You cannot. I mean, if you're CEO of a startup, your strategy cannot be we are going to become viral. This is so random. I mean, how many random games there are every year? One, two, zero. It's like it's not a strategy. So your strategy is I'm making a game with good retention, with good monetization, with good K factor, which is the virality factor. And based on that, I check my CPI, cost per install, and I'm proving to myself that if I pay $5 to get Fraham to play my game, Fraham in average will spend more than $5 within the first year or within the first 6 months. So it's my return on investment, my ROI is positive after X amount of months. We call it return on ad spend. So and usually it's measured on a 1 year timeline. Once you get that, once you're able to prove that you can acquire at scale, so you cannot just acquire 1,000 people, but you can acquire 100,000 players every, I don't know, 2 weeks or every month, and that your return on investment ROI is positive, then unfortunately you go to people who've got money and you ask them to lend you money because you have a profit for every user that you, on average, for every player that you acquire, you'll make some profit, and then you will share this profit with the person who lends you the money. In Finland, there was this famous case where the Supercell, who's very, very successful, and there's this company doing a merge game, and the merge game did very well. It had very good KPIs and a good return on investment. We assume because we didn't see the number. And then we heard in the news that this company borrowed money, or Supercell lent some money to this company in order to do user acquisition. So we know exactly what happened. They just had a good game with good KPIs, good return on investment. They just needed somebody to lend them money. It just happened to be a game company um, also based in Helsinki, and lending them some money. So that's just how it is. And there are companies who I just say, okay, your return on investment is 10% on per year. You take five, I take five, but I lend you the money or something like that. So sorry to disappoint you. There's no silver bullet. Virality or phenomenon uh, uh, is not a strategy, and the only strategy that I know that works is just build your game for monetization, for retention, etc., and then make sure you're able to acquire as cheaply as possible, and then borrow money.
Okay. And obviously, when you're hiring, you hire developers, you hire artists, sound engineers, etc. But let's say, obviously, you're trying to make your game a success. There's no silver bullet. But what sort of people would you say hiring first to try and get some sort of user acquisition or get it in front of people is important? Like, social media people or conventional, marketing people. Like, what would you say are the more key people to hire?
Okay, that's a good question. So if you're a big company, or not if you're a big company, what I've seen in big company is basically you build your team, your user acquisition team, which is performance marketing team internally. And there are two main topics here, and there are more. It's not zero and one. There's a bit more finesse to it, but basically there are two craft. The first craft is an art team that is able to make um, advertisement pop-ups, graphics. And keep in mind that the skill to make graphic for advertisement has very little to do, very very little commonality with making graphic for games. Making graphic for games and making advertisements for Facebook is two different craft. And sometimes we see in big company like a game artist who doesn't have a project for 6 months will go into the marketing team and try to do some ads. It doesn't work. It's not the same craft. Making an advertiser and making a game graphic designer is two different things. So anyway, so the first one is graphic designer who make ads for Facebook, Google, etc. And the other one, they are campaign manager. There are people that use some tools and some artificial intelligence, some algorithm in order to display those ads on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, on Google Ad Search within all the games. And they measure the performance of all those ads. And they have so many graphics, so many variations of the graphic, the algorithm will choose which graphic to put and which graphic works the best. Once we know graphic works best, you go back to the graphic designer and say, I need more of those type of the ads. It's a bit more complicated than that, but just to get a rough explanation. So this is how big company do it. They recruit campaign manager and they recruit advertiser, graphic designer. For smaller company, for startup, today I'm in startup. I'm not in corporate anymore. I'll go to a specialist. I'll go to a company that has been doing campaign. Even big company, like EA, Rovio, etc. Eventually, they run out of bandwidth internally, and they work with external professional who know how to make uh, graphics and how to make campaign. But for a startup, I will not recruit. I will go to professional, and I will just run the first campaign before you have critical scale, and it makes sense to do it internally for cost saving. I will just use professional out there.
Okay. And like, how much would you? Again, obviously, there's no exact figure, but how much would you say? Let's say if you raised 1 million, how much would to, let's say, launch a couple of games? As a startup, how much would you say that goes towards that? Towards hiring an external person or a firm to do some marketing and to do some campaigns. Because obviously, you need money to develop and to test. Like, how much would you say you should allocate?
Mm. Yeah. Out of 1 million, I would say you develop 800,000. You develop your game. You have 200. I'm not saying you spend 200, but I would say you spend the first 100 on the campaign, and it's not you don't spend 100 in one day. It's like you spend 500 and then maybe 1,000. But I will keep 100,000, so 10% of it, to scale my user acquisition as I improve my game. So it's not like spending in one day. I spend a bit and then I improve my game. I spend a bit, I improve my game. I start to see, it start to be working. So now can I do it at scale? So let me try to acquire, 10,000 in 1 hour just to see, what kind of quality of user I get. Once you have those numbers, when you have your validation about ability to recruit new players at scale or acquire those at scale, and then the quality of them and their ability to return revenue on your investment, then again you go back to people who have the money, who could lend you the money for ramping up your game.
Okay, sounds good. But before we proceed, just if you could just move a little closer to the mic or just speak a little louder, just because it's just tapering off a little bit, especially once you're just wrapping up a question.
Is that better like this?
Yeah, like if you could just like keep it like that, for throughout the whole question, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay, so what was your favorite game to play at Gameloft?
Uh, Not many. I mean, when I was there, they were launching one of the Superman game, and we played a lot because there was this culture of kind of support. So we were not asked, but we were strongly recommended to play the game just to kind of support the launch and to support the game. I have to admit that Gameloft was very atypical experience in my career, and the amount of focus we put on our own product was absolutely insane. There was almost this idea that you're not even part of Gameloft. You're so different that you don't have to worry about. So yeah, I didn't get engaged a lot with the Gameloft game, to be honest, except when Superman. I can't remember which version of Superman launched, and we played together.
Okay, and obviously after that, you were at Rovio for I think 4 years, and Angry Birds, another personal favorite of mine. I think probably a favorite of a lot of people, and especially like the original version, and also like the VR version. My wife, loves the VR version. She discovered it recently on my on the Quest headset, and she said, "When did you get this?" I was like, like 2 or 3 years ago, or like it was a while back. And she's like, "Why you never tell me about it?" Because it's just so funny. And in all fairness, it is pretty fun. I've got back into it recently, and I remember seeing the GDC talk, that you did. Tell us, about that and how you got your job at Rovio specifically, and what you did there, and what Rovio projects you worked on. Because Rovio, like they've got a lot of projects after they did the original Angry Birds.
Mhm.
So, like, tell us about all of that.
Yeah. So when I went to Gameloft, I was also in discussion with Rovio, and Rovio was interesting to get me back into the game industry. They thought after 7 years at DChock, I had something to bring to Rovio. And back then, Rovio was really pivoting from premium to free to play. And they needed people like me that really believed in free to play to start to change the culture internally. But out of the two opportunities, working in operations at Rovio and being studio manager for Gameloft, I thought I'd go with Gameloft. So after a year at Gameloft, I was still in discussion with Rovio, and Rovio was telling me, after a year at Gameloft, you're even a better candidate for us. You've not only been 7 years at DChock, but you have this vision of new project prototyping, and for the last year, what you've done is great learning. So we want you even more now as Rovio. Would you come and figure out what you could do for us? And I accepted. So I left Gameloft after a year and I went to Rovio without a job description. And it's tough. It is tough. It is tough the first day to, say hi to people that some people you don't know, and they ask you, but what's your job? And I was like, I don't know yet. It's a bit hard, to kind of figure out what to do in a company. But very quickly, well, no, maybe not very quickly, but quickly, I figured out about what kind of added value I could have. So first of all, I realized that there was not a lot of consolidation about all the different prototypes that were happening in the team. So I said, okay, let's do a roadmap. Let's figure out who's doing what and when they plan to launch and what they try to achieve, and are those two games going to launch the same month? That would be weird. We don't have enough marketing bandwidth. So doing roadmap management, or you say go to market management. So gathering information from everywhere. Then I realized there were a lot of support functions at Rovio that were kind of free satellite, um, trying to do their best, but missing a little bit of, if I knew a bit more about what they did, I would help better. So, the audio team, for example, or the QA team, or the customer support team, all those teams trying to help, but being really not totally integrated into the process. So I thought, okay, what I can do to help is to take those support function and integrate them as much as possible to the process of making game. So they are really sticking to the needs of the team. And the third one I figure out is, there's when you work at Rovio, there's always very specific project like, hey, Microsoft would love to have Angry Birds on Windows Phone, or Windows PCs. So we need we need to find a team who could take Angry Birds and make it available. Kind of porting things that I used to do at Digital Chocolate. So those three activities. One was really about managing the roadmap. The second one was managing the services, the support function. The third one was to take care of a specific project. So this is what I did at Rovio for 5 years. Of course, not from day one. Kind of ramping up, finding my place and how to add the value. Um, but yes, that's in a nutshell.
Okay, and so Rovio, their biggest game, Angry Birds. How often did you play Angry Birds?
Very, very often. One of the support function that I ran was to take care of what we call the long tail portfolio. And if you have a portfolio, I don't remember the numbers, but let's say 20 games. Rovio had 20 game live at some point. To be honest, only 4 or 5 were making a lot of money, and then you have 12 games, 12, 15 games that were just here to either do cross promotion, so making sure they will send players to the top game, or they will do some revenue, and there will be some IAP revenue and advertising revenue, or we will do even R&D. Like if there's something we want to try, we'll try on the long tail portfolio. Part of the long tail portfolio was Angry Birds Classic from 2009. So it was in the portfolio I was managing, and we were trying to improve Angry Birds Classic to either make more money or make more ads money or make better cross promotion. So I was playing Angry Birds Classic quite a lot for work. So yeah, maybe not daily basis, but 100% weekly basis for sure.
Okay,
Mm.
and after that, you worked at EA. And again, how did you get that job, and what did you do specifically at EA, and what projects did you work on?
Okay. So after 5 years at Rovio, I thought it was a good cycle. I had done what I wanted to do. I also realized that the way I was handling those three pillars that I described, especially all the support function that were still managed separately from the game team, I thought that came to an end, and I thought the next logical step, and I was not the only one thinking about that. It was more of a company thinking that all those support functions should go embedded into the game, and I thought it was a great thing. So eventually, a big pillar of what I was looking at Rovio was going to disappear. I think it was about time, and it was good for the company and the company culture. So I thought, okay, maybe it's time for me to start to look. And when you start to say you're available, basically you get headhunter coming to you very quickly. Um, the world goes around. And EA contacted me for a job in Sweden. I said, well, I'm not really ready to move to Sweden. I'm living in Finland. Send me to Spain. I might think about it, but if you send me from Helsinki to Stockholm, I'm not sure I want. But then eventually they came back and say, oh, we have another position. There is a studio in Helsinki that we want to recruit a GM, general manager for. So I started at EA being the general manager of the Track 20 team in Helsinki, and Track 20 had two games, one which was SimCity Build It, and the other one which was in a prototype that we were making.
Okay, and now onto the company you founded, Village Studio Games.
Mhm.
Tell us, what it is you guys do.
Cool. So before that, I just one step back on EA. So I started as a general manager for one studio. What we did in Helsinki was pretty cool because we managed to put SimCity Build It back in revenue growth. The team were quite well into prioritizing features that really worked well for us. Also, there was the COVID. So the COVID, the whole game industry made a lot of revenue. So roughly after a year after I joined, and SimCity Build It was doing great, really increasing its revenue month to month. There was EA Mobile that was created within EA, and there was a bit of restructuration, but especially they noticed that this game was growing. So they came back to me and say, okay, this is pretty cool what you're doing in Helsinki. What about if you take care of 4 different studios across the globe and try to do similar type of growth? So after a year at EA, I was a group GM looking after 4 studios, and that was professionally very, very rewarding. I decided to leave for personal reason. I thought, it's a phase in my life before turning 50 where I would love to become entrepreneur. I would love to take a break from corporate, and this is where Village came. So when I left EA, because I've been running operations, I've been running studios for majority of my career in game. I thought, well, I just apply what I've learned, and what I've learned is basically mobile, free to play, casual studio. I thought I'll just set up a mobile casual free to play studio. And also, some investors came to me and said, "Oh, I heard you left EA, and I heard you wanted to be entrepreneur. You want to have a startup. You know, can we discuss, because we're investing, and we'll be we love your profile." So I was it was pretty cool. But then today my co-founder is called Will Luton. Or I've got two co-founders, Will Luton and Tak Fong. Will Luton is the product, and we used to work at Rovio together. And he came to me and basically tapped on my shoulder and said, "Hey, what's up? What are you doing after a year?" And I said, "Well, I'm thinking to become entrepreneur and do a casual free-to-play mobile studio." And he said, "Well, I'm thinking the same, except have you been looking at this thing called blockchain and crypto?" I was like, honestly, I was just out of corporate. I mean, out of EA, and EA didn't pay any attention to crypto or blockchain. So my reaction was like rolling my eyes to Will and say, come on, Will, it's a bubble, But I said that just because I didn't know. I was not educated. I just assumed that it was a bubble. And then you say, "Well, hold on, think about forget about everything you know about Bitcoin, forget about everything you know about those profile picture and those kind of artistic NFT that are being sold so for crazy price. Forget all this. There's this technology called blockchain where when players can save data, and eventually, if they save data, own their data, they can display the data from game to game. Why don't we work together?" And I was so inspired by his view about how the blockchain technology could add value to the players. How can the blockchain technology could add value to the developers? And I'm all about user tests. I'm all about qualitative data, quantitative data. I'm all about user, I mentioned about how you put your game in the hand of real users very early. I'm all about persona. I'm all about that. And I was like, well, that's it. I just gave you a silly answer telling you it's a bubble, but I don't know anything what you're talking about. So let me be curious, because I'm a curious person. Let me be who I am, curious. Let me dig into the topic. And I came back 2 days later and say, "Well, this is amazing what we could do with that as game makers." So this is how Village Studio started. Basically, Will having the vision about how a new technology, a new tech could add value, and myself being you know, having the ability to take a strategy and deliver it, and then finding Tak Fong, who's an amazing CTO, and just deciding to go with it. So um, I can tell you more about Village and what we're trying to achieve, etc. But that's basically the genesis of me leaving EA and meeting Will and Tak and deciding to move forward.
Okay, and for Village Studio Games, did you raise funding or is it bootstrapped?
No, we raised very early. So I was out of EA and I was trying to enjoy a break, which never happened, basically, because I got so excited about Village. Will had his consultancy firm, and he was still doing consultancy, every day of the week. And Tak was in a startup. So we all three of us, we had something to do, and we just decided, like, let's sell our vision, and we made a PowerPoint. So what happened is, October last year, a year ago, we kind of decided, let's do it. And then we realized it was end of October, and we realized, oh, you know what? There's this conference called Slush in Finland in early December. So in 4 or 5 weeks, we get 600 or 700 investors coming to Helsinki for Slush. It's a huge investor startup meetup. So why don't we make a deck and we start to pitch? So it takes us 4 weeks, to make a pitch deck. We come from corporate, so it's the first time we do a pitch deck. We never had to raise money before. So we do a pitch deck, 11 slide, and we go to Slush. I mean, the deck was ready the night before, and I start to pitch alone, at Slush. It's the first time I pitch, of course I make mistakes, and I'm shivering, and my pronunciation is horrible, and I'm not sure about the messaging. It goes not so well. But eventually, after speaking 10, 15, 20 times at Slush, the last 2, the last 3, the last 5 start to be better and better and better. But anyway, that's also how we started to pitch. And from there, it was December. We carry on pitching over Zoom in December. And in January, we had found our lead investor, and the follow investor were found, by February. And in March, we signed the paperwork. And in June, we got the money. So we started to operate in June 22. And we are today in November 22. And we are raising again. We're raising a second round now. The first one was 2.1 million euro, and that allow us to operate for 18 months roughly. We've been operating roughly 6 months. We have 12 months left, and we are being proactive now to raise our next round, to make sure we have enough money to operate forward.
Okay, and that 2.1 million euro, like how many people, including yourselves, does that, effectively, amount to in terms of
Yeah.
employees?
So we set ourselves. So keep in mind that before raising the money, we thought we'll raise, I don't know, 2 million or 3 million, and then we'll be 20 people. This is the type of plan you make at the beginning. You want to be 15, you want to be 20, and you need this, you need that. And eventually you realize, okay, we just raised the money, and then the bear market came right after we raised the money. So we say, okay, we need to be super diligent. We knew we wanted to be diligent, but now we force ourselves to be not only diligent, but super diligent. Okay, how many people do we need? Okay, we need 9. Can we do with 8? We could do with 8, we could do with 7, but 9 will be the minimum we want. Okay, let's settle to 9. What is the runway with 9 people? That's 18 months. Okay, that's good. In 18 months, we can raise again. So it's 9 people. To be fair, it's 7 plus 2 agency. We have an art agency that looks after our art direction and art production, and we have a marketing agency looking after our community and our community growth. The reason we have agencies is just because we are extremely demanding of what type of profile and person we want to look for those positions. So we just want to take our time. In the meantime, we need to operate and we need to move forward with art and community.
Okay, so the art agent, because obviously the marketing agency, the handling marketing, the art agency, is that the actual artwork for the games, or is that artwork for external promotional material?
Yeah, at the moment, it's about the art that is required for the prototype that we're currently
Mhm.
making called Puskin, which is the Match 3 Battle Royale. So it requires some art for that, but it's especially the art to do the playken, which are the avatar and the wearables that we are making. In a nutshell, we are making avatars that have wearables. The wearables carry power; they carry stats that translate into power or power up in the game that they are visiting. So the avatars are moving from game to game, and they carry power from game to game.
Okay, so the investors that you got for your game, were they people or any of them that you knew or contacts through networking? And what part of the Village Studio Games pitch was they like really, really attracted to? Was it the NFT aspect of it? Was it just the general game aspect, or was it the team? Because obviously you got some, heavy hitters, industry veterans on, the team. So, like, what was the thing that made them go yes?
Mm. So first of all the investors we got eventually came through warm introduction. So they come from our network. Somebody introducing us to Animoca Brands. Animoca Brands introducing us to Venrex, which is another investor. And Venrex is a great investor because Animoca is a great investor for obvious reason. They're very well known on the Web3 market and the Web3 scene. Venrex is a great investor. They have ties with the UK fashion fund. So they are talking to brands, and brands are looking at the metaverse, and we are providing avatars with wearables. So, of course, a good medium for brands to go from game to game. So what I'm trying to say here is they all come from introduction. Eventually you get some luck from internet, people contacting you on LinkedIn, and you get the pitch and but eventually they're even our advisors, or even our angel investors, sorry, not advisors, angel investors, they are people that we know, CEO of Jagex, and chairman of Facepunch, and there are people from within our network. um, Then your second question was, sorry, the first question is how do we get the investor? And sorry, what was the second question?
So yeah, the first question was like, how did you get the investors? And like the second question was like, what aspect of
Oh yeah.
your pitch was they really attracted to? Like, was it the NFT side? Was it making mobile games? Was it the team? What was like the thing that really attracted them?
So that's an interesting question because the dynamic has changed from pre-seed to seed. So now we are raising the seed round, and we did this spring raise. So as mentioned, from December to March, we raised the pre-seed. So in pre-seed, we had a deck with 11 slides, and we had three co-founders only. We have no team. Three co-founders, being busy somewhere else. Okay, I was being busy being unemployed, so being busy trying to get a break. Will was busy with his consultancy, and Tak was in his own startup. So we had no bandwidth, we had no line of code. We had a vision, and we had 11 slides trying to depict this vision. But I have to say, there are two main things that attracted the investor back then is the quality of the co-founding team. Is like, finally, game makers want to enter Web3 and make entertainment for the players using the Web3 technology, not just people trying to create a Ponzinomic tokenomic and try to milk revenue or profit from users. So the quality of the funding team. And the other one is the vision we had, the vision that blockchain technology adds value to the players, adds value to the developers see a benefit in seeing avatar moving from game to game, power moving to game. It's called interoperability of game item. So this vision that we were able to depict to investors, they say, well, we know it's not easy. We know, you know, probability of success is low, but God, if you succeed, or if you even succeed half, this is going to be huge. So high risk but high reward type of things. And if we've heard that many times, if anybody can crack this as a people motivation, as a human motivation, that will be you. It's like you have the experience of working with players. You have the experience about understanding players' motivation to retain, to spend, to work together, to work against. So we got a lot of positive feedback saying that, well, what we like from you is your ability to make game and understand players. Today in the seed round, the dynamic is a bit different. Of course, people still love our co-funding team. They also love the team we put together. We're 9 people, so 7 plus 2 agency, but still the quality of the agency counts. So they love that. But I have to admit, the investors are looking way more in the product that we're able to deliver and how the product is validating some of the assumptions, some of the hypotheses, that we are putting on the table. So now investors we're looking, okay, cool, okay, I get the team, that's fine. You can make games and you can crack this problem, not easy, get it. Okay, but what is the product you have to validate that? And that's what attracting investors nowadays in the seed is the amount of progress we were able to do in the last 4 months, and say, oh, okay, so you were able to deliver all this in 4 months. That's pretty cool, and that goes definitely in alignment with the validation that we want to draw from those products.
Okay, so are you already in the process of raising your seed round?
Yes. So what we did, there was a lot of people who wanted to talk to us right after the pre-seed. Obviously, there was a press release, and Animoca Brands and Venrex, kind of relayed the news. A lot of investors came back then and say, "Hey, can we talk? We'd like to invest in your next round." We said, "Okay, cool. We take your name, address, email, you name it. We'll talk to you soon when we raise the next round." So we created this vacuum between the two raises, so we could really focus on the product. And in October, early October, we started to raise again. So what we did for 3 weeks in a row, and that was intense and it was almost brutal. We spoke to roughly 70 different investors, and we started to pitch. And out of 70, you get people that we already knew, people we already talked, some people we knew we never talked, some people that we talked for the third time, some people we never talked before. There was a little bit of everything. And now we're in a position where we are very close to close that round. We have a strong interest from lead investors, and we have already some soft commits on the people that don't want to lead the round but are happy to participate. They're called follow investors. So we have already a few millions soft committed to this round, and we are about to wrap it up now in the next few days or weeks. So yes, we are in the mid. We're not in the middle of it. We're kind of at the end tail of raising the seed round.
Okay, so that's exciting stuff. So you got your pre-seed, 2.1 million euro, great stuff. Obviously, that's a nice, pre. I think that's a pretty decent seed round, let alone a pre-seed round. And then, or like not long after you're doing your seed round, so obviously you still got money from your pre-seed round, I'm
Yeah.
assuming. And then let's say you get like roughly how much do you think you'll be getting from your seed rounds? Do you
Yeah,
think?
so it's always a range. We know that if we get 4 million, we'll be able to deliver a significant amount of the roadmap to drive validation and to drive really market fit validation. We know that if we get up to 6 million, meaning that we will be oversubscribed on the amount of money we ask, we'll be comfortable there. Not comfortable in the sense that we can waste our time, but basically we can run a bit faster. We can hire maybe a couple of more Unity developers, and we just run faster. We go to validation faster, and also allow us to have more failure, meaning that if a game doesn't work, we can just wrap it, close it and start something fresh. So we're thinking around the 5 million mark is going to be realistic. And that's where we are. So we are chasing $5 million for this. Yeah, we move it into dollars because for some reason talking about British pound or euro is not the vocabulary that investors are talking. So we move into dollars, $5 million.
So that's one of the big changes from pre-seed to seed is the currency
The
denomination.
currency, exactly. That's a major change. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I bet that's been a bit of a like obviously with conversion rates as well. So yeah, that's probably been an interesting one. So yeah, like we're saying, like what you got the 2.1 million, you've still got that part of that money left over. Let's say you've still got money left over when you get, let's say your seed round. Let's just call it 5 million in between.
Mhm.
Like, do you start moving on to the plans that you've laid out for seed, or do you wait till effectively the pot from pre-seed has run out until you go and dip into seed? Like, what happens? Because obviously, if you get it at the tail end, and then obviously you go directly into seed, and that supports you. But if you've still got plenty left over, and that supports several month runway, what's your general plan in this sort of scenario?
Yeah. So currently we have enough cash to operate for 12 months, 12, 13, maybe 14 months, depends on, the different fluctuation that exist. So we are comfortable. We also have to remember we are in a bear market at the moment. So raising money is not as easy as it used to be 6 months ago. So this is why we are a little bit early, we want to secure um, the team. And one of our cultural pillar at Village is sustainability. And when we recruit people, we want them to feel that this is not a 6 months place. This is a 3 year place. This is a place where they can come and grow and contribute and enjoy the journey with us. So this is why we are a little bit keen on getting this seed sooner than later. First, because of the bear market and uncertainty aspect of it. The other one is to show the team that there is safety in joining Village, and we are able to deliver on our vision. We can go to that journey. Um, so when we get the money, and I assume this money is going to come maybe not before Christmas because there's always paperwork, but let's say in Q1 23. Then basically it becomes one big pot. There's no differentiation about the plan for pre-seed and the plan for seed. They are the same plan. It's just that we just move a few steps forward. So once we get the pre-seed money, leftovers, and seed money, we are covering 3 years, 3 year operation from today with an increased headcount. So we're able to have more people working on the vision. Um, but basically, there's no. What I'm trying to say here, there's no pre-seed plan and seed plan. It's just one big vision. It's just one plan and one step at a time.
So you just basically accelerate things
Yeah.
as you've got more resources.
Yes.
Okay, so what advice would you give somebody that's looking to start a company like yours and make it successful, but and also wants to fundraise as well? Like, what fundraising tips would you give? Like, good pitch deck, that's obvious. Having like a good concise idea, but like, what other thing would you say based on the feedback that you've got from pre-seed and now the seed round? And you going through it and doing a successful round and another round that's going to be successful very soon. Like, what tip would you say? Make sure you definitely do this and don't do these to really attract investors.
Wow. Okay, that's that tough question. So I've got few learnings. So first of all, if a pitch deck is has too much information, you have too many opportunities for people to, on Zoom, they will, how do you say, close their eye and try to get closer to the camera or closer to the screen. And you see them physically on Zoom. You'll see them, they try to read the details of your deck. This is calling for trouble because the more information you give, the more. I don't know if it's true, but I heard somebody told me that investors are just looking for one opportunity to say no, and if they find it, they're out. So the less opportunity you give investors to discuss and to find a reason to say no, um, the better. So it means that the first meeting, at least the first meeting, of course, after they will dig and you ask questions and everything, it's fair enough. But the first meeting, you want to give the vision, and you have not to have too much thing on your deck. So first thing don't is remove stuff from your deck, and when you have removed enough, go back at it and remove more, because eventually you have to have a crisp narrative that is inspiring, that depicts a bright future, but you don't want too much detail. That's one thing. The other thing is worked very well for us is that we didn't speak to investors individually, like one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday, one on last week, and one on next week. No, we don't speak to investors until there is a week which is pitching week, and you ask them to book a slot in your week, and basically you speak to all your investors in the same week, and that's allow you to focus. I mean, your narrative is better. Um, you start to understand during the same week what investors say. If it's too spread apart, you don't remember what investors said. It's hard to figure out how to improve your pitch, how you improve your narrative. Here it's that. And the other thing is put a little bit of pressure on investor. I think it's fair enough. It's a game eventually. I mean, it's a yeah, game maybe not be the right word, but people are looking to invest their money. People are looking for money to be invested in their company. So it's a little bit of a seduction more than a game. Um, and then if you put a little bit of pressure because other investors know that you're talking to 10 other or 15 other investors during the same week, then people take decision a little bit faster, or they're moving forward, or they're saying no a bit faster, which is also very valuable. A good strong no is valuable. You just stop chasing that person, etc. And maybe the last one I'll give is everybody will have a different opinion. Everybody will tell you what to do, and you could change your deck after each investor meeting following their advice, but you'll just yo-yo from one idea to another and back to the same idea, back to a third idea, back to the original idea. It's just yo-yo forever. So we try to be mature ourselves. We try to figure out what were consistent feedback, and we got two in pre-seed. We got two feedback. We got very consistent. First, when we started to pitch, we didn't have the CTO. They said, "Ooh, startup without a CTO, it's a big risk. It's not impossible. It's just for us investors, it's a big risk." And the other one, we were raising, I think, 5 million euro for pre-seed. They said, "Way too much money for a pre-seed. If you are at one, maybe two, we could think about it." So we decreased our raise to 2 million. We were oversubscribed, so we were 2.1 million eventually. Um, so we took those two consistent. They were consistent feedback we got from a lot of investors. So make the difference between noise, everybody's opinion, everybody has got an opinion, to consistent feedback, and then think about, is that something you want to act on? So clear, crisp narrative, um, uh, and looking for consistent feedback. Yes, and then group all the meetings together. It worked well for us, at least.
Okay, so you mentioned that because you didn't have a CTO, they, was a bit put off by that. Was that actually? So obviously, we've talked about yourself, but your other co-founders, do they have technical background or not? Before I ask the next question.
Yeah, well, Will Luton, who's a product person, knows how to use Unity, is able to do a prototype, which far away from what I can do. I can turn on Unity and update the SVN, and that's all what I can do. But Tak is a magical CTO. He's got years of experience in mobile free to play game. He worked on CSR2. He built the whole tech team for CSR2 in what is now Natural Motion in London. He also worked in crypto. He's been working on EVM and working coding on the blockchain for many years. So for us, it's an amazing technical background about having games and crypto knowledge. But myself, yeah, I've got two left hands when it comes to coding or technical ability.
Okay, so yeah, so that's linking to the question that I originally wanted to ask was they are saying, you need a CTO. If you had, let's say the CEO, the main guy, was, his background was a tech, background. Let's say he was a hardcore programmer, had been coding for, many, many years. Would the CTO requirement still be there, or would it be like right now we don't need it because there's already a technical person, and that technical person could maybe become the CTO when there's another CEO, or they could hire a CTO?
Yeah, that's a great question because it brings the question of what is a CEO, what's the role of a CEO, and I think more and more it becomes obvious to the industry that the role of the CEO is not to be a product owner, designer, or somebody who will work on the product, and the CEO is not to be a technical owner, somebody who looks at the technical. So CEO should be looking after the company culture, should be looking after making sure the money flows in or the investments are happening, you know, relationship with media, relationship with investors, making sure that this is the face of the company and the company is in a good light and has everything it needs to operate. Um, and usually the CEO works with the CEO very closely for that. Uh, but no, I mean, to answer your question, no, a CEO cannot be a product owner and CEO cannot be a CTO. Of course, if it's a startup of 3 people or 5 people, yes, okay, of course you have to, you can't afford. But eventually, the sooner you have the CEO detached from operational duty, the better. And by the way, at Village, we don't have a CEO by design.
Okay, so that's very okay. So good. The reason I'm asking all these questions is because me and my business partner are looking to raise, money pre-seed, and it is for a games company, so obviously it's very similar to yourself. So obviously, I think it's very interesting to a lot of other people, but I'm very interested in it. So, are you effectively saying that if you go to investors and say we got a CTO, we got a COO, and this is what we're doing, they won't turn around and say, "Where's your CEO?" They'll be okay with that effectively.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So because we said ourselves, oh yeah, we think we don't need a CEO. We are 3 co-founders, and we want to set up some rules about decision making and ownership. And how do we make sure that we hear the voice of everybody in the company before decision owners or craft owner are taking the eventual decision? And at some point there was a discussion. Oh yeah, but investors wants to talk to the CEO. If what do you say, shit hit the fan, they will want to. Who's the manager? Bring me the manager. Investor. So that was an assumption we on the table. But then we figured out, well, this is only an assumption. I mean, who says it's true? So let us pitch without a CEO. And if we have a consistent feedback from investors saying, I love what you're doing, but I will not invest unless I get a CEO, well, then we can adjust. We can think about it. We can be reactive to it. But in the meantime, we would prefer to operate as 3 co-founders with some set of rules about how we make decisions. That's how we want to do. Um, and and we were right. Uh, in seed round, out of 70 meetings, only one person noticed that there's no CEO, but didn't say it's a problem for me. And in pre-seed, I think there were 2 or 3 because there was a slide about it, and we were kind of very upfront about it. And only 2 or 3 had a discussion about no CEO, but the rest just read, okay, no CEO, co-founders, we move forward. So yeah, don't assume that investor wants this or investor wants that, or it will be a problem in the future. If this is what you want, just go for it, and then you learn along the way.
Okay. I mean, that's definitely good feedback. I'm not saying, we're looking to raise, and, it's when I do get the opportunity to talk to people that have done it, I do really like to dive deep. So just going back to the pitch deck side of things, you were saying, don't put too much information on there. You were saying, obviously, don't have too many slides. I think you said yours was 11.
Mhm.
And, like, on each slide, what would you say is too much information? So you don't want like 2 words unless it's like a slide that really makes them think, which is really isn't going to be all of them. But likewise, you don't want 20 bullet points. what do you think is the optimal amount to, like you said, so they're not squinting over the Zoom call, but they're not like, okay, where's the information?
Yeah, so think about it. So for us, the pitch slot, they were 30 minutes. Out of 30 minutes in pre-seed, it took us roughly 25 minutes to present. It left really 5 minutes, but then we realized it was quite hard. So for the seed, it took us 10 minutes to present the slides that we have, 15 maybe, if there's any stop or questions or something like that. And that leaves 15 minutes to start the meeting nicely without jumping into the deck, kind of, how do I know you? Did I meet you? Or do you know any, having a small talk, then move into that, and then leave the discussion 5 minutes open at the end, without the stress of looking at the clock and having to stop in 30 seconds. So I would say if you have 10 slides and if you know you want to present 15 minutes, that 1.5 minutes per slide, 1.5 minutes is like 4 bullet points and a graphic, because you have one idea that you want to repeat a couple of times on the same slide just to make sure it's printed. Uh, but I would say it's just about cutting your narrative to the bare minimal. It's because it's not about hiding anything, it's just about clarity. You have a chance to leave an impression after half an hour. If your message is all over the place, or if your message has too many ramifications, nothing is remembered. You have, right, I met Fraham, he's working on A with B, with his team of B, and his vision is C. That's already three things to remember for half an hour. It's a lot. So, how do you decrease that to one? Oh yeah, okay. Village, they're working on interoperability of game item. Oh yeah, get it. It's like these kind of things. So too much is, beyond 4 bullet points, I would say. It's too much.
Okay, yeah, for sure, because you're not the only, person or company that they're seeing pitches from, and obviously they're seeing pitches, multiple pitches a week, probably maybe even multiple a day,
Yeah.
over a period of weeks, especially when they're going through that process. Like you said, they're looking for excuse to eliminate. Like if they say, oh yeah, this team didn't have the any technical background or any business background, or their sort of vision was all over the place, or it's just already done before, it's just derivative. Like, yeah, they are definitely looking for, and I think that's life. You're at least when trying to be successful, which obviously they're trying to be successful in their stage, and obviously when you're a developer, like you're saying, Rove, you're making 15 prototypes. They're looking for excuse to say no to a particular prototype and say yes to one. So it's effectively the same thing, just at different sides of the table. So yeah, I think that's definitely some really good advice. I've learned a lot. I'm sure a lot of other people will learn that. So why Web3? What do you think that allowed you and your team to bring to your games that you truly believe couldn't be done with existing Web2 tech?
That's the $100 million question. And to be honest, investors, not all of them, but a few of them, love to ask this question. So I'll go back to my time at Rovio, and I'm very open about it. It's like today, if I were at Rovio and I had the culture of Web3 that I have today, and remember when I was at Rovio, I was looking after the long tail portfolio, those 12 games. That basically one of their role was to cross promote game from players from those games to the main game. So we had a lot of organic downloads for Angry Birds Classic. But Angry Birds Classic was making only, I don't know, I just throw a number, let's say 5% of the total revenue, while Angry Birds 2 from 2015, if I remember correctly, was making 70% or 60% of the yearly revenue. So of course, if somebody downloads Angry Birds Classic and doesn't really make any money for the company, at some point you will want to tell the player, "Hey, do you know Angry Birds 2 exists? I mean, don't you want to play Angry Birds 2? Because if you go there, I know I'll make more money, basically." And also in terms of entertainment, you go from the original to the kind of free to play version, the kind of upgraded version. So we tried cross promotion. We tried to make pop ups, and we tried to incentivize the player to go to Angry Birds 2. It's just super, 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 super hard. If I remember correctly, 3% of new users in Angry Birds 2 were coming from cross promotion, which was low and big or big and low. It was, we could have done more. But today, if I had my culture, I would advocate within Rovio, say, why don't we set up a servers here in Espoo, in Helsinki, in Finland, and on the server we will save consumer data. We already do. I mean, that we already have servers where we save player data. And in Angry Birds, at some point, I will make sure that you earn a hat, and the hat has a utility in Angry Birds Classic. Power up goes faster, explodes bigger, or Chuck is going fast and bomb is exploding, and these kind of things. And then at some point in the experience, you say, "Hey, player, you know that the hat you have is the hat you need in order to succeed in the new event that started yesterday in Angry Birds 2. You just got the Viking hat, and they're just starting the Viking event yesterday. So go with your hat in Angry Birds 2, and you will kick asses. You will be at the top of the leaderboard." And basically, you're selling a utility of a game item in another game. And I'm not saying all the players are going to go to Angry Birds 2, but at least players will know Angry Birds 2 exists, and they will know what they can expect there. They know that the item has a utility over there. So I would say that this is a very efficient way to do cross promotion, to get people to the top performing game in a way. And of course, the product owner of Angry Birds 2 say, "Hey, hold on, I don't want Fraham coming with his hat. He didn't pay his hat. I'm selling those hats here in Angry Birds 2." Well, think about it. You're just giving away, let's say, a $5 hat to Fraham in Angry Birds Classic, and you get Fraham in Angry Birds 2 for $5. You get him in Angry Birds 2. If you go to Facebook today, we go back to the discussion we had about paid user acquisition. I'm not sure for €5 you can get Fraham. Maybe you have to pay €10 or $10 to get Fraham into Angry Birds 2 through an ad on Facebook that Fraham will click and then download the game and then play. So eventually it's cheaper to have Fraham coming with a $5 hat for free in your game than to acquire Fraham from Facebook for $10. So in terms of user acquisition, it could be a very efficient way to bring new users into your game. So that's what saving user data on the server can do, because eventually you say that Fraham is a player, he owns a hat, and you save that on the server. Now, if you want to do a cross promotion between Rovio, Angry Birds to King, Candy Crush Saga, then suddenly you get this huge wall in your garden. It's called walled garden. There's no way King is going to talk to Rovio and say, "Let's have a server somewhere in Finland or Sweden where we save the data and we share between the companies." It's just never going to work. So this is what blockchain offering is, this ability to save the data beyond walled garden between company. And of course, I'm not saying that the first two companies that are going to do that are King and Rovio. They're most likely unknown company A and unknown company B with very small game A and very small game B. But eventually, as this takes off, as players get used to have ownership of their data and game item, there is a scenario where the whole industry is pivoting there, and even big companies like Rovio and King are looking into this ability to save consumer data on the blockchain as an added value for the players, but also as an added value for them, developers. So this is a vision we have, but it starts with what people could do and don't do into how we can make it happen using this technology called blockchain.
So right now you haven't really got any, games released. Like when will your game be coming out? And are you hiring anyone, for anyone that's listening, are you hiring?
Yeah, two good questions. So again, definition of launching is blur, as we discussed earlier in this discussion. What we would like to do is around Q1, before March, we will have to have our current prototype available online for anybody who wants to play it. At the moment, we have a link that we need to share over, put it on Discord, or we have a link that we send over email, or this kind of thing. So we would like in Q1 is to have a site, our website, that hosts our prototype with a huge disclaimer saying it's a prototype. It's like, take it for what it is. So Q1 will be the time when we want to have the game available. And then the other question was, are we recruiting? Yes, we're currently recruiting 3 critical roles for us: head of growth, so somebody with community in mind, understanding how to grow a community, but also how to launch a game, how to take care of a brand, and how to make a brand visible. Another one is art director. At the moment, we don't have an art director. We would love to find an inspiring art director that has a vision, and they will be able to really come to us and bring their craft to the product. That will be for the playcons, the avatar, but also for the games and even the brand. And the third one we are recruiting is a senior game designer, somebody who's been working in you know mobile free to play, but not only. Somebody who understands systems, game system, progression, motivation, persona, this type of kind of critical knowledge.
Okay, so Q1, you're hoping to get it in people's hands, and like what platforms will you be releasing the game on?
Yeah, at the moment we would love to put it on mobile. Obviously, we have background in mobile, but I don't know if you've the people have followed what Apple said a few days ago. Basically, at the moment, the use of NFT on Apple platform is a little bit problematic. I mean, the utility of those NFTs or game items is a little bit problematic with Apple. So we're not hoping to put it on Apple too fast. So PC is our web browser. Basically, web browser is our first focus. We might have PC, Mac, downloadable, but that's also something else. But we know on Android we should be able to side load it and have a decent experience on mobile. So I would say at the moment it's PC first, and then looking at mobile through Android.
Okay, so you've worked at a great deal of amazing companies, and now have obviously started your own race funds, which is all great stuff. What unique tips and insight would you give after working at those companies and now starting your own?
Wow. Wow. What do I say? I need to be clever here. So, I mean, for me, it's the ability to say no and yes. So, first of all, saying no is difficult. Um, if you want to be, if I want to be focused, I need to be able to say no to a lot of things and then to say yes to few things. So, first of all, the ability to say no and decide not to do something in order to prioritize something else and do something else better. That's something that I cherish, and I advise a lot of people to think about. What is it that you shouldn't do in order to focus on the good thing, and then the say yes. It's also easy to say yes. It's usually obvious about what you have to say yes, but there are those odd decisions in your life that you said yes to, and it was not obvious, and the answer should have been no, or it could have been known very easily, but eventually you took a risk, you took a leap of faith, and you said yes. And at least for me, if I trace back my life and where I am today, professionally or even in my private life, I can identify maybe 5 or 6 points in my life when I said yes to something that is not trivial, something that it would have been so easy to say no to, but I said yes, and I took a leap of faith. It was scary, it was uncomfortable. I did it, but it was a defining moment in my life. And without this moment in my life, I will not be today in Finland, entrepreneur, co-founder in a startup, or I will not be a father and married, or in Finland. I will be somebody different. I'm not saying I'm somebody less good. I'm just saying somebody different. But so it's like ability to say no and ability to say yes. So ability to say no to make room for what is important, and not being afraid to say no, because it is difficult to say no, but saying yes also to the difficult one, the one that are not obvious, but eventually that are really defining who you are and where you stand, either in your career or professional life. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's something that I kind of close to my heart.
Okay, so I see that you've got a light paper on your website. Obviously, a minimal version of a white paper.
Mhm.
How important is it to a startup, or is it more just because you've got an NFT blockchain startup that you've got a light paper? So, what's your take on it and your reasonings or your team reasonings for creating one? and like what's it being useful for? Like what's it helped for? And did you have it before you got investment?
Right. We didn't have the Litepaper for pre-seed. We have it for seed. Um, the Web3, the crypto gaming, so Web3 gaming format came with two things that we were not used to from free to play. The first one is build your community first on Discord and share with your community what you're doing instead of kind of waiting for the game to be ready before you show it to your community. Get feedback from your community on Discord, build your user base and your fan base before you even launch your game. That's the first thing. The other one is disclose what you intend to do in the spirit of transparency. Is the same spirit that smart contracts are public. You can read what's the code of the smart contract. Um, Display that very honestly on a white paper or a light paper. White paper is a longer form than of a light paper. And my assumption is Web 2 are going to steal those good ideas from Web 3, because eventually building a community early is a good thing. Web 2 company have been trying to build a community after launch or just before launch, but usually after launch, and nurture the community to improve virality and improve retention. But it's never been a huge focus. I'm talking about the majority of the mobile free to play companies. It's never been a huge focus. But I think this is something good that is coming from Web3. And I could anticipate that Web2 company are going to borrow from Web3 the fact that you build a community as you build your game. The other thing is the light paper is basically displaying to your audience what you intend to do, what kind of game you're trying to do. It's a little bit, formatted. It's a big document. It's a long thing to read, but for people who really fall in love with what you're trying to do, it's a great place to feel, kind of get the juice out of what you're trying to do. So I would say that those two aspects come from Web3. I would say I can anticipate they are going to be borrowed one way or another from Web2. And I think they're great things to do if you want to build a community and engage a community around your project. But it is because we are Web3 that we thought about doing it.
Okay, so it is because you're Web free.
Yeah.
But like, I think that's a fair point that just because you're Web free doesn't mean only you guys can do it. There's definitely going to be a lot of, because not everything's going to go to Web free straight away, or even at all. Like you won't necessarily need to go to it, but they'll still create companies, create products, raise money, and as a result, they'll probably borrow some of that side of it. And I've definitely seen that with NFTs, blockchains, ICOs, Web3 stuff, where, like you're saying, they're creating the community way before they've got a major launch. Whereas, typically they're like, let's launch, then let's create, the Facebook page for that particular product, or maybe just before launch. But effectively, we've got the product already done. Launch it, and then we go. But obviously, there's not that much of an iterative approach. But I think we're gonna start seeing that where even the big studios are gonna involve the community in the development process and the planning process and get feedback from them instead of spending 2 years, millions of dollars making a game, and then they realize nobody wants to, play that particular game, but a few tweaks at the core stages, the core foundations would make for a more, successful game. So yeah, I think that's definitely fair enough. So your Discord group, and did you have that set up before you did pre-seed, or is that more of a recent thing for seed? And how have you gone about, getting members for that? Because obviously that's very important nowadays.
Yes. What we did, we created the Discord like few hours, the Discord server just few hours before the press release of the pre-seed funding will go out. In the press release, there will be a link to our website. On our website, there will be a link to our Discord. On the Discord, you'll have, the funnel of accepting new members. And what we like to say is accidentally we got a community. So we got roughly 1,000 people coming and joining our Discord server the day of the announcement. Ever since, we've been trying to grow that, which at the moment is it's just hard. I mean, it's hard for everybody to get the attention of people that are not just crypto investors. What we are aiming at is get players to start to pay attention to what we do, because we do something for players, not something for crypto. I'd say called degen. So people that fully believe in crypto and only live for crypto, and trying to gain out of crypto and fluctuation and these kind of things. So it is tough to grow this community. We're still learning, to be honest, and we knew from the beginning, from the pre-seed, and we said that to investor, that one of our weak point as a team is our inexperience in building communities on Discord, like preventively. We've been managing community after launch, for example, at Rovio, whether it is customer support or community management. We've been doing that within the team. So we have some experience, but building a community from scratch as we build the product, we don't have experience. So we knew it was a weak point, and it's clearly one of the weakest point at Village today. Is just a tough. It's just a tough craft, but we are getting better every day. We are learning every day, and we are moving forward. So it's rewarding, but yeah, it's one of the hardest things for us to do at the moment.
Yeah, I think a lot of startups, and I know I've struggled with that, is that community side of things, user acquisition, getting people you know as part of the ecosystem outside of the actual core development side. It is a difficult one, especially when you put so much effort into making it. You just kind of want it to launch, people to download it, but then you realize the development part, the development stage is just one stage, which might have sub stages, but it's just one stage of releasing a successful game. The next part of it is maintaining it, talking to the community, getting user acquisition, whether that's Discord, whether that's Facebook marketing, but then also taking that seriously and not being like, okay, I'll post a Facebook ad, tick, done. It's not one of those things. It is something that you said or throughout the podcast that you do need to concentrate on. So yeah, it is a very important one, and I know people do find it difficult, especially if there isn't somebody on the team high up that has social media and promotional experience. So what advice would you give to someone that's looking to work for companies like Rovio or EA or Gameloft? Because I hear all the time, especially from people that aren't, let's say, in the industry, aren't coders or aren't artists, for example, and they want to become it and they want to work for a big company. Maybe they'll like it there, maybe they won't, but they want to. Like, what advice would you say? This is what will really help you stand out and get a role at a company like this.
Mm. It's a good question, because of course I can reflect to my own experience when I came to Finland 17 years ago. I mean, my CV was non-game related, but they took me in a job interview, and in the interview I was able to sell myself, and obviously I managed. And 17 years later, I'm still in the game industry. Today it's tough. I mean, today we prone diversity, for example, and we accept that if we want more diverse team, we might have to go out of the game industry to find talent. The reality is, when you get a CV from somebody who's never worked in the game industry, and then next to that you have 5 CVs of people who have worked in the game industry, it's just easy to go to the 5 one. So there are some craft that are way more open to people who have not worked in the game industry previously. So for example, product manager. We took a lot of product manager, people who are looking at the data of the game and working with the designer to define the prioritization on features and potential on making better KPI for the game, better performance for the game. And those project managers, a lot of them are coming from the bank industry, from the consulting industry, from industry that has nothing to do with game, but they understand number, they understand system, they understand progression, they understand statistics. We've been recruiting a lot from outside the game industry. Same with user research. You don't really need to be a player in order to be a good user researcher. You need to be a good psychologist. You have to understand human needs, human motivations. And those are just 2 examples where it could be entry to the game industry. And of course, not everybody is a psychologist, and not everybody is a statistician. So I understand it's difficult. Another one is we've seen a lot of people coming into the game industry being a QA. Like, I love playing game, I love that. I am organized in my head. I'm able to recognize patterns, and I'm able to recognize defects, so things that out of pattern, and I'm able to write those down in a way that is understood by a coder. You don't need a degree. You don't need, having. You don't need anything else than just appreciating the entertainment that the game provide, and also ability to to discover deviation and be able to write those down. So what I'm trying to say here is, I mean, even a coder, like one last as an example, even a coder, you've never coded a game, but you have Unity at home and you've been doing prototyping at home. Put that on your CV. I have been prototyping game at home on my free time, and I'm a banking coder, but I love game, and I've been doing this. Goes a long way if you want to enter the game industry. So what I'm trying to say is, it is at the end of the day quite a closed circuit and closed vertical. We are trying to be open. It's not easy, and there are ways to put the foot in the door. I just gave a few examples. It's just, if you think this is your industry, go for it. Remember what I said to myself 17 years ago. If I want a fun job, I need to start to apply to fun jobs. And this is what I did. I applied at Digital Chocolate because I thought it was going to be fun. And this is where it took me. So I think I recommend everybody to not feel that, my CV is not good enough, they will never. No, just make sure you apply, make sure you put your best forward about why gaming industry is for you. How can you relate to that? Are you a gamer, or are you coding at home games? Or can you apply your craft can you add value to the game industry because you apply your craft from another industry to the game industry? Just go for it. Go for it.
Oh, yeah, definitely good advice. You know, I want to ask more questions about what you got, Village Studio Games and Play Camp, but there's just not that much information online. So before we wrap up, like, is there anything else that you would like to say about Village Studio Games and Play Camp that you haven't already said? Because, like I said, there's not much information online, and there's not much I can really ask you based on what I have seen. But, like, is there anything else that you can share? About it, about more about the gameplay fundamentals, more about, like, also actually, where do you see Village Studio Games going? Like, what's your long term vision for it? Do you want it to become a $1 billion company with like tens or even hundreds of games, or do you want it to be, stay at, let's say a few, tens of millions, concentrate on a few core games, but you do them really well? Like, what's your long term vision if you had your way?
Right. So first of all, I agree that there's not a lot online at the moment. We are focusing a lot in making progress on the product. And if there's anything that I would want the listener to remember, is that at Village Studio, we are focusing in making interoperability work. So how you take your game item from one game to another. And then I'm not saying that in the sense of technological ability to do it. We're not solving technological problem. We're solving motivation. Why I, as a player, care to own a game item and to take it from one game to another. So, that's a nutshell. Is, could this be the future of gaming? Future of gaming is a lot of what we know today. On top of that, we have the ability to own the game item we have, and those game items have a utility in different games. This is something new, and that could change the way the industry works, the game industry works, the same way that the smartphone changed it, or the free to play changed it. It's at this level of magnitude. This could be a turn the industry takes. In terms of village, in terms of culture, human culture, we are trying to make a journey. We want to make that journey, and we want to spend that journey with people we enjoy spending that time with. So it's very important for us to recruit the right people. And whatever happens, we want it to be a fun journey. And whatever the outcome of Village is, I don't know, we bankrupt or we are acquired or whatever, whatever the outcome is, if we stop and we look at each other and say, hey, that was fun, let's do it again, that's success to us. Doesn't, I mean, nothing else is success. Success is we are in a phase in our life where we want to have fun trying to make games and having this vision and grinding to it. So that's very, very important for why Village exists and why we are after that. Now, if while doing that we can invent the future of gaming using the blockchain technology, if we can show that player care to own their data and they enjoy taking that data from game to game, and that our game are played, and all this is on top of having an amazing journey. So to your question, do we want do we want to be $1 billion company? No, we don't really want to, but we understand that our vision, if turns out to be true or half true, could be that it is a possibility. But at the moment, we're not focusing on creating $1 billion company. We're focusing on looking at the motivation of players and why do they even care.
Definitely good stuff. So that's all the questions I've got for today. I just want to thank you, Cyril, for coming on, taking the time, giving some real nuggets of information, some great insight about Digital Chocolate, Gameloft, EA, Rovio, because I know the products of these companies. Not only do I love them, many of the listeners love them as well, and they'll love to hear from yourself that how these companies work, what you do there, instead of just playing Angry Birds, instead of just playing Nova or Modern Combat, actually hearing from somebody that's there, and especially from somebody that was not a developer on those products, because to hear that there's another side of it, that you can be involved with something that is very developer heavy without being a developer or even an artist or any type of engineer. So I think that a lot of people are going to get a lot out of that. So again, I just want to thank you for coming on. Definitely have you on again. Love to have you on again once you in the new year, once you do some sort of launch, whether it's like a few people, whether it's like a beta launch. Love to get hold of the game as well. I will also get all the links of Cyril, so for social media, for Litepaper, everything like that, and they'll be in the description that the listeners can check out. So yeah, just want to thank you, Cyril, for coming on.
Thank you very much, Farhan, for having me. It was great. Thank you very much.
It was indeed. If you like the podcast, give it a 5-star rating, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.